He thought it was just another routine stop. 73 inches, a 50, no red flags, just protocol. But when the window rolled down, the face staring back wasn't a stranger. It was his daughter, grown, in uniform, and silent. Years of distance collapsed into a single breath as memory and duty collided on a rain-slicked highway. What do you do when the person you're sworn to protect is the one you pushed away? And what happens when silence becomes the only thing you have left to say? It begins with a sound, thin, sharp, urgent. A siren, distant at first, then closer, louder, cutting through the October dark like a blade through silk. The road is slick with hours of rain, the kind that blurs the line between reflection and reality. Blue and red lights ricochet off the asphalt, twisting in puddles like broken neon. A lone patrol cruiser glides across the blacktop, its headlights carving tunnels through the mist. Before we follow the echo of taillights into the silence that grew between a father and the daughter he couldn't reach, and uncover the small, shattering moments that led from a traffic stop to a reckoning years in the making. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support allows us to keep telling these stories, the ones stitched together from unsent letters, unfinished conversations, and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, some roads do circle back. Every subscription keeps the light on a little longer for the memories that might have otherwise vanished into the night. What you do here matters to the ones who waited, and to the stories still unfolding in the rear view. Thank you for listening. Thank you for remembering. Inside, a man quiet, composed, professional grips the wheel, eyes narrowed, jaw set. To any observer, he looks like any other officer doing his job. But there's something in the way. His fingers tap the wheel, restless, uncertain. The night holds more than routine. There's no music in the car. Just the soft hiss of tires and the intermittent crackle of the radio. Dispatch speaks in monotone, a voice worn smooth by repetition. Speeding vehicle, northbound, late model sedan. License plate matches a recent entry. Nothing flagged, nothing unusual. Still, something itches in the air, a feeling he doesn't name. The kind that settles in the chest before the brain can explain it. Familiar, like déjà vu. But colder. The cruiser accelerates slightly. Rain beads on the windshield, each drop a moment, a possibility, sliding away before it can form fully. The road is mostly empty, save for one car ahead. It cuts through the night with quiet defiance, unaware of what follows. Or maybe it knows. Maybe that's the problem. As he gets closer, the lights reflect back at him, first in the brake lights, then in the mirror. A brief flicker. A face? No, just the back of a headrest. A shadow. But still, something about the shape of it. Something buried, half remembered. He signals the siren again. One long cry. The sedan slows. The stop begins not with a command, but a question. Why does this feel wrong? The officer parks, puts the car in park, checks the mirror. His face, tired and taut, looks back. He studies it for a beat too long. The years have settled in the lines around his eyes, in the slope of his shoulders. He reaches for the flashlight, pauses. There's a photo clipped to the visor, an old one, faded. A little girl in a blue dress, holding a toy badge, smiling like the world was hers. He doesn't look at it now, but he knows it's there. The rain slows to a drizzle. The windshield wipers drag in slow rhythm, like a clock ticking in reverse. He steps out, his boots splash into the shallow puddle beside the cruiser. The camera lingers on his silhouette, haloed in artificial light, the mist curling around his shoulders like smoke. Ahead, the sedan waits. Still, silent, harmless. But that's the lie, isn't it? This is where the story begins, not with a crime, or a chase, or a gun drawn in panic, but with a man walking toward a car, not knowing that what waits inside isn't a suspect. It's a mirror. And he's about to see himself, only not where he expects. Not in the driver. In the passenger seat. The timestamp blinks in the corner of the dashcam feed. 21:47. A stretch of road curls ahead, empty but for the occasional shimmer of passing rain. The screen captures it all in grainy monochrome, the sheen of wet pavement, the sway of tree limbs in the wind, the ghostly glow of overhead lamps. It's the kind of night that blends one moment into the next, indistinct, uneventful. The cruiser hums along the lane, its engine steady, unwavering, almost bored. Then movement. The radar chirps once. Digital numbers flash against the dark, 73. Another scan, confirmation, still 73. He blinks, leans forward, not because he doubts the reading, but because his mind takes a second longer to catch up. 73 and a 50, not reckless, but careless. A subtle defiance. Enough to warrant attention. Enough to make the routine click into motion. He taps the lights. A polite warning. Blue floods the edge of the frame, cascading off the trees like lightning caught mid-burst. The sedan ahead doesn't brake immediately. A delay not long, but noticeable. 1 second, maybe 2. Then the red taillights flare. It slows, veers gently toward the shoulder. He follows, already reaching for the citation pad. His movements are automatic, born of repetition. He's done this 100 times, maybe more. Speeders, drunks, drivers lost in thought. Most apologize, some argue. But it all ends the same. A ticket, a warning, a returned license. Another entry in the blur of memory that is night shift. But something's different now. He doesn't know what, not exactly. Just that there's a hum beneath his skin that wasn't there before. A tension, coiled low and quiet, like the air before a thunderclap. He adjusts the rearview mirror. The car's make becomes visible, a dark sedan, newer model, well kept. The kind that blends in, no bumper stickers, no damage, nothing to suggest it doesn't belong. But it's not about the car. It's about who's inside. He can't see clearly through the tinted glass. The rain and the angle obscure most details. Just the silhouette of the driver upright, alert, and a second shape beside them. Passenger, possibly asleep. Possibly not. The passenger's stillness unsettles him more than he admits. He keys the mic. Not because he needs backup, this isn't that kind of stop, but because protocol gives comfort when instinct wavers. Unit 4-2, traffic stop, northbound, just past mile marker 17, black sedan, 2 occupants. Dispatch acknowledges. The voice is sterile, clinical. It grounds him, but only for a moment. He watches the footage play back on the dash screen. The blur of the car speeding past, the flash of numbers, the blink of red as it slows. None of it reveals anything more, just speed, just time. Just a number. 73 and a 50. But speed is never just speed. It's motive, it's urgency, it's escape. And somewhere between those digits lies the truth of why this car was in such a hurry, why the driver's foot pressed harder on the gas than reason allowed. He doesn't know yet. But the road has a way of unraveling stories that people try to outrun. And this one, he senses, isn't going to follow the script. The rain begins to settle into a light drizzle, soft enough now that it no longer drowns out the sound of his breath. He steps closer to the stopped car, each footfall landing with deliberate weight, as though some part of him already understands the significance of this moment, but refuses to let it arrive too quickly. The cruiser's lights cast long shadows across the roadside, elongating the forms inside the sedan, stretching them into distorted fragments of human shape. He approaches the driver's side window. It's rolled down halfway. The soldier behind the wheel stares straight ahead, jaw clenched, expression unreadable. Young, clean-cut. Probably no more than 22. The uniform is neat, polished. A rank insignia glints faintly in the rainlight. He's seen this type before, focused, alert, everything by the book. The driver says nothing, just hands over the license and registration with quiet compliance, nothing unusual. But then his eyes shift not to the papers, not to the speedometer, but to the passenger seat. That's when time stutters. He sees blonde hair first, pulled back, damp at the ends. It clings slightly to her neck, the way it always did when she was younger and too impatient to use a hairdryer. A profile, half lit by the car's dome light, emerges in pieces, the soft slope of her cheek, the faint freckle just below her temple. A scar above her left eyebrow, barely visible but there. He remembers how she got it. Fell off her bike when she was 10. Refused to cry. It hits him like a wave, breaking low and violent across his chest. A recognition so sudden, so intimate, it steals the air from his lungs. It's her. But that's not possible. She hasn't been home in years. 3? 4? Their last conversation ended in silence, the kind of silence that settles into bones and stays there. She had left angry, determined. Joined the military against his wishes. Didn't even tell him until after she was gone. He tried calling, at first, left voicemails. Then he stopped. Maybe pride, maybe fear. Now she's sitting 3 feet away, as if no time has passed at all. As if the distance they built had never existed. His hand trembles slightly on the doorframe. He doesn't speak. He just stares. And in that stare is everything unspoken. The years between them, the memories buried under uniforms and duty. The weight of a father's absence. Then she turns her head. Slowly. Their eyes meet. No words are exchanged. But something shifts in the space between them, fragile and raw. Her expression is unreadable, neither surprised nor cold. More like acceptance. As if she knew this moment would come. As if she'd prepared for it. She wears the uniform too. Dark fabric, crisp. The insignia is there, clear, proud, earned. He sees her not just as his daughter, but as a soldier. As someone who has lived through things he hasn't. And that realization brings with it an ache deeper than he expected. There is no greeting, no recognition in words. Just the flicker of something ancient and complicated that passes between a parent and child when love has been strained by time. The driver shifts uncomfortably, glances at her. Then at the officer. He knows something's off but doesn't speak. The rain taps softly against the metal roof. The cruiser's lights pulse behind them, casting both of their faces in brief washes of red and blue. He steps back half a pace, unsure whether to continue with protocol or say anything to her. But he says nothing. Because what do you say when the person you've been missing for years suddenly appears in the passenger seat of a car you weren't meant to stop? Sometimes fate isn't loud. Sometimes it just whispers in the form of a familiar face on a night you thought would be routine. It was a warm July morning when the photo was taken, one of those golden hours that made everything seem softer, simpler, as though the world hadn't yet learned how to bruise itself. The sun filtered through the open window of the precinct's break room, catching dust motes mid-air. The officer stood in full uniform, freshly pressed, polished badge reflecting the light. His daughter stood beside him, barely up to his waist, grinning like she'd just been handed the universe. She had pigtails that didn't sit quite even, and a plastic toy badge pinned crookedly to her shirt. It read, "Junior Officer," bold and proud. He crouched beside her, arm around her shoulders, and smiled just wide enough to look natural. Someone, maybe a fellow officer, maybe her mother, snapped the photo. Click, frozen forever. A father and daughter, captured at the exact moment before things began to change. She had always looked up to him. As a toddler, she used to wait by the front door in the evenings, plastic flashlight in hand, pretending to scan the hallway for bad guys. She once made him a paper citation book and insisted he write tickets for the neighbor's cat for trespassing. Back then, her admiration was unquestioning. He wore the badge, and to her, that meant he was brave, strong, unshakable. He remembered the way she used to beam when he walked through the door. How she'd run up and leap into his arms, asking how many bad guys he caught that day. How she wore his old uniform hat like it was a crown. He'd laugh, tell her she was too small for crime fighting, and she'd argue back with a seriousness only a child could wield. She told everyone at school her dad kept the whole town safe. She said she'd grow up to be just like him. But the years crept in, as they always do, and with them came questions. About where he went at night, why he missed her school plays, why he came home with bruised knuckles and a blank stare some evenings. She once asked him if he was scared when he went to work. He said no, even though he was. Every time. He thought shielding her from the truth was protection. But she noticed the way he flinched at loud noises, the way his voice changed when the radio crackled. She began to understand that courage didn't always look like comic books and shining badges. The shifts got longer, the silences stretched wider. He told himself he was doing it all for her, for their future. That one day, she'd understand. That sacrifice was part of the job. But what he didn't see then was how deeply she needed something more than protection. She needed presence. Years later, after the arguments had started, after she'd grown old enough to sharpen her questions into accusations, she told him she didn't want to wear a badge anymore, that she didn't want to be like him. The words were quiet, measured, but they landed with the force of a bullet. She said she wanted to do good but not like this. He remembered watching her walk down the driveway after that, backpack slung over one shoulder, her silhouette disappearing into the amber of the streetlight. She didn't look back. He kept the photo in his wallet, though he hadn't taken it out in years, not until recently. The edges had curled, the ink faded slightly, but her smile remained, that perfect, radiant smile. Before the distance, before the silence, before the job came between them. And now, standing outside her car on a rainy night, he couldn't help but wonder if the little girl in that photo still lived somewhere inside the soldier in the passenger seat. Or if she'd been left behind, like so many other things he'd promised to protect. The box wasn't hidden so much as ignored. A plain thing, worn cardboard, corners softened with time, the tape on its edges barely clinging to itself. It sat beneath his bed like an artifact, not buried, but untouched. He saw it sometimes when reaching for shoes or sweeping dust from the floor, and each time his hand would pause, linger for half a second, then move on. It wasn't fear that kept him from opening it. It was something heavier, a weight without a name. Inside were letters, dozens, maybe more, some still crisp and sealed, others softened from the press of months stacked atop them. He remembered the first one well. It had come weeks after she left for basic. The envelope was smudged with fingerprints and heat, the ink slightly blurred from desert sweat or rain he never asked. Her handwriting danced across the paper in neat, careful strokes. "Hey Dad," it began, and he'd read those two words more times than he cared to admit. She wrote about the drills, the early mornings, the taste of powdered eggs, how the sergeant barked worse than his old K-9 partner used to. She joked about how sore she was, how she missed her favorite cereal, how she'd finally beat someone in a push-up contest. There was light in her words then, a fire just catching, and it almost sounded like her voice was back in the room. He'd smiled reading it, smiled so hard his eyes stung. He wrote back once, just once, said he was proud, said he hoped she was staying safe, asked if she needed anything. She didn't reply directly, not in the next letter. Instead, she sent stories. About the heat, the sand, the odd friendships that grew between strangers in strange places. She mentioned the night sky out there, how it looked cleaner, closer. How it made her feel small in a way that wasn't frightening but freeing. After that, the letters came more often. From Kuwait, from Kabul, from base camps scattered across landscapes he'd only seen in grainy intel photos. Each one carried a piece of her he didn't know what to do with. A joke. A memory. A quiet question. Never bold enough to be direct. Do you still think about me? He kept them all. Lined them up inside the box like folded maps of a road he couldn't bring himself to travel. He stopped opening them after the second tour. The pain wasn't in the words. It was in what the words reminded him of, that she was still reaching out, still offering him a glimpse into her world, and he couldn't cross the distance to meet her. He told himself it was pride. That she had left on her terms, and he respected that. That his silence was a kind of strength. But over time, the silence turned to rust. It corroded the bridge between them, slow and unseen, until the letters became artifacts, not messages. Sometimes, at night, he'd sit on the edge of the bed and let his feet brush against the box, just to feel it there, just to know it hadn't disappeared. He never threw it out. That would mean giving up. That would mean admitting the road was closed for good. But he also never opened it. And so the letters remained sealed, not because he didn't love her, but because he did. So deeply, so wordlessly, that even her voice on paper was too much to bear. It's strange, he thought, how silence can grow louder than any scream. Louder than gunfire. Louder than grief. And in that box under the bed, her voice waited, still speaking, still hoping. Even if he hadn't yet found the courage to listen. It always starts the same way in his mind. The kitchen, late afternoon, sunlight sliding across the countertop like it's trying not to be noticed. The air heavy with unsaid things. Her backpack leaning against the chair, half-zipped, books spilling slightly over the top, geometry notes, maybe, or college brochures she never brought up again. He remembers the silence before the storm, how even the refrigerator's hum felt louder than their words. He'd been home late from his shift again. The clock ticked in slow accusation. She was 17 then, old enough to drive, old enough to argue, and lately, that's all they did. He doesn't remember how it started, not exactly. Maybe it was the letter from the recruiter he found on the kitchen table. Or maybe it was her skipping school to attend a military prep seminar. Maybe it was just one too many mornings where they passed like strangers in their own home. But he remembers what he said. Not the exact words, but the shape of them. Sharp, heavy, designed to protect, but delivered like an attack. You don't know what you're signing up for, he'd said. The words edged with fear, disguised as anger. You think this is a game? You think you're ready for war? She stood by the sink, arms crossed, face flushed. Her jaw clenched in that familiar way that always preceded defiance. She didn't raise her voice, she never had to. That was what unnerved him the most. She just looked at him, like he was already fading from her life. I'm not trying to be like you, she said. And those words hung heavier than any accusation. He told her she was being reckless, that she didn't understand the cost, that he'd spent 20 years wearing a badge and had nothing to show for it but calluses, nightmares, and a daughter who now wanted to disappear into uniform because she thought that meant strength. He said she was running away. She said he never listened. The kitchen echoed with their voices, then louder, harder. The kind of shouting that leaves marks, not on skin, but in the spaces where love used to live. Dishes rattled. A chair scraped harshly against tile. At one point, he thinks he might have said she'd regret it, that she'd come back broken. She flinched, not visibly, not physically, just a flicker in her eyes, and then she was walking away. She left the room with the quiet rage of someone who had already made up her mind. She didn't slam the door, she didn't yell goodbye, she just left. Out the front door, down the porch steps, into the waiting dark. He stayed in the kitchen long after she was gone, pacing, breathing through gritted teeth, telling himself he'd give it a few hours, that she'd cool off, come home, that they could start over in the morning. But the morning came, and her room was still empty. The bed made, the closet half full. Her recruiter called 2 days later to confirm her enlistment. He told himself he should have stopped her. Or maybe that she never needed stopping, just someone to listen. But it didn't matter. By then, the choice was no longer his. And ever since that day, the house had never quite sounded the same. The kitchen quieter, the echoes dulled. As though she'd taken not just her footsteps with her, but something larger. Something he still hadn't found the words to name. The first week was the hardest. They broke them down fast, early mornings that bled into punishing afternoons. Gravel underfoot, the roar of shouted commands over clattering boots. Everything she'd known was stripped away, reshaped beneath sweat and repetition. Her civilian self, soft-spoken, sharp-eyed, quietly stubborn, was filed down to something leaner, tougher, hungrier. They told her to forget who she was before. She didn't need to. She had already started to forget him. At night, when the lights in the barracks dimmed and the voices dulled into restless breathing, some recruits whispered about home, about girlfriends and parents and the lives they left behind. She listened, but said nothing. Her silence wasn't guarded. It was chosen. Her father's name never left her lips. When asked, she spoke of her mother, of childhood summers by the lake, of the town she grew up in. She spoke of the sound of cicadas at dusk and the taste of roadside diner milkshakes, but never of uniforms. Never of police cruisers. Never of the man who once carried her on his shoulders through 4th of July crowds. She became known for her discipline. Quiet but precise. Not the loudest in the formation, but always first to rise, last to break. There was something in the way she held herself, shoulders squared, eyes locked ahead, that made the drill instructors notice. She didn't flinch under pressure. She didn't snap when tested. Her focus was a shield, and behind it she built herself again. In the field, she learned to move unseen. Camouflage became second skin. She memorized terrain, angles, wind patterns, crawled through mud, climbed over fences, hauled more weight than her frame should have allowed. Her hands blistered, split, healed, and blistered again. She learned to fire with both hands, eyes steady, breath slow. Every mistake was marked and corrected. Every correction taken without complaint. If her muscles ached or her knees buckled, she said nothing. She didn't just survive, she rose. Command noticed. Within 6 months, she was guiding drills, leading exercises. Her peers watched her the way people watch a storm on the horizon. Quiet awe, cautious respect. No one knew much about her past, only that she didn't carry it with her, not visibly, anyway. Sometimes, in moments of stillness, cleaning her rifle, folding her uniform, waiting for orders, memories tried to return. The smell of her father's cologne. The rasp of his voice over the police scanner. His laugh, low and rare, like thunder far off. But those memories were faint, blurred by distance and dust. She let them pass like fog rolling over a ridge. She didn't chase them. She didn't write home except to her mother. Her letters were short, factual. No mention of the kitchen fight. No mention of the day she walked out. No mention of him. She wasn't angry anymore. Not really. But she had stopped needing his approval long ago. Out here, in the world of barked orders and unforgiving sun, no one cared who your father was. Only who you became when the pressure hit. And what she became was something neither of them could have predicted. Not a shadow of him. Something entirely her own. The camera finds him seated at the edge of his desk. Uniform sleeves rolled just above the elbows, fatigue in the corners of his eyes. A wall of certificates hangs behind him. Commendations, awards, a framed photo of his first deployment. But it's his voice, quiet and deliberate, that fills the room. He doesn't speak like someone eager to remember. He speaks like someone trying to do justice to a story still unfinished. She was one of the best we had, he begins. Not because she was the loudest or the strongest, but because she was the most reliable. The kind of soldier you didn't have to look over your shoulder for. She just showed up, every single day. The footage cuts to a grainy training clip, her silhouette in the desert heat. Dragging a wounded comrade during a simulation, jaw clenched, eyes forward. Dust kicks up around her boots, her form steady beneath the weight. The CO's voice continues over the image. She kept to herself more than most, didn't joke around much. You could tell she had a line, and once it was drawn, you didn't cross it. But if someone on the team needed help, she was the first there. No questions, no hesitation. He pauses, leans back. Something shifts in his face, just slightly. She didn't talk about home, not ever. Some of the younger guys would swap stories at night, moms, girlfriends, old friends from high school. She listened, smiled, sometimes. But she never added her own. It was like there was a wall around certain parts of her, and we all just learned to respect that. A photo appears on screen. A team lined up in front of a Humvee, squinting into the sun, smiles forced and awkward. She's in the middle, hands behind her back, posture perfect. Her smile is small, tight, like she knows she has to offer something, but not too much. I asked her once, the captain says, why she joined. She just shrugged and said, seemed like the right place to be. I think it was more complicated than that, but she wasn't the type to unpack things with words. She let her actions speak. Then, quieter, except for that one night. The interview room stills. The ambient sound hums in the background, suddenly louder. She got a call, don't know from who. It was late, near midnight. I walked past the comm tent and saw her sitting there after, just still. Not angry, not upset. Just still. Like she'd been frozen mid-thought. When I asked if she was okay, she wiped her face real quick and said it was nothing. Said she was fine. He shakes his head. That was the only time I saw her cry. And it wasn't sobbing or falling apart, it was quiet. One tear, maybe two. Then it was gone, like she'd buried it before it could reach the surface. He doesn't try to guess what the call was about, doesn't name the wound. Some people carry their history in their voice. She carried hers in silence. The camera lingers on the captain's face as he looks past the lens, as if seeing her across time, through the dust and distance. Then, with a quiet certainty, he says the words that hang in the air long after the screen cuts to black. She never needed saving, but she was definitely trying to save something. The cruiser's lights still pulse behind him, rhythmic and slow, casting long shadows that ripple across the wet asphalt. The drizzle has returned, light but persistent, collecting on the brim of his hat and the shoulders of his jacket. He stands at the driver's side door, his reflection faint in the window, distorted by the curves of glass and the tremble of falling rain. For a second, he doesn't move. His hand hovers just beside his flashlight, not reaching for it, not needing it. He can see enough. Inside, the driver stares ahead with the vacant alertness of someone trained to wait. A soldier, no doubt. His uniform is crisp, the collar stiff even in the car's dim interior. His hands rest on the wheel at 10 and 2, textbook. There's no panic in his face, no fidgeting. Just composure. He could be 19, maybe 20. The age doesn't matter as much as the certainty this young man is not afraid, not hiding anything, not reacting to the tension that buzzes like static in the space between him and the officer standing outside. But it's not the driver that matters. Not tonight. She's in the passenger seat, face turned ever so slightly toward the window, as if the passing scenery outside offers something more bearable than what's just beyond the glass. Her posture is rigid, but not in fear. It's control, containment. The same quiet armor she's always worn when emotion threatens to show itself. She doesn't look at him, not fully, not yet. The window lowers with a quiet hum, and the air between them changes. Moisture and memory collide. For a moment, he's not an officer. He's not anything official. Just a man standing on the side of a dark road, trying to recognize the daughter he hasn't seen in years. The pause after the window drops is longer than it should be. Longer than any traffic stop protocol would allow. It stretches into something weighty, something that presses on his chest like gravity turned inward. She turns her head, just enough. Their eyes meet. There's a flicker there, deep behind the surface of her expression. A brief quake of recognition, buried quickly under the steady discipline of her training. Her face is unreadable, not cold, not warm, just still. Like she's holding a breath she doesn't intend to release. "Evening," he says finally, and it feels like the smallest word he's ever spoken. It lands with a dull thud, swallowed by the patter of rain and the low hum of the cruiser behind him. The soldier in the driver's seat glances over, cautious now, picking up on something he hadn't seen before. He doesn't speak, but there's a flicker in his eyes, a question forming. "Who is this really about?" She responds with a nod. Not a word, not even a full motion. Just enough movement to acknowledge he's real. He's here. He's standing inches from the last chapter they never closed. He knows he's supposed to say something else. License and registration. Reason for the stop. The whole script. But the words falter. Because nothing about this is routine. Not when silence says more than a ticket ever could. And so they sit there, all three of them, caught in a moment that teeters on the edge of something fragile: history, recognition, forgiveness, maybe none of those things. Just a window cracked open. And the weight of everything that's never been said pressing against it. "License and registration, please." The words leave his mouth colder than he intends. Measured, professional, flattened by years of practice and protocol. They carry none of the tremble that lives behind his ribs, none of the questions that press against the back of his teeth. He doesn't let himself speak as a father. Not here. Not yet. The badge is a shield, and tonight, it feels safer to hide behind it than step fully into the hurt. She doesn't flinch, doesn't blink. She moves with mechanical precision, her motions practiced, impersonal. Her hand reaches into the glove compartment, pulls out a folded envelope, and without a word, places it through the open window into his waiting palm. Their fingers don't touch, though they come closer than they have in years. He looks down at the documents. Her name is there, typed neatly beside her photograph, all as expected. But reading it is like seeing it carved into stone, something permanent. Something that doesn't need his permission to exist anymore. He glances up, waiting, hoping for some flicker of warmth in her face, a twitch of a smile, a question. Something that says she remembers him as more than a man with a badge and a bitter voice. But her gaze is set straight ahead, fixed on the blurred horizon beyond the windshield. Not defiant, not frightened, just distant. The soldier beside her shifts slightly in his seat, jaw tightening. He senses the tension, even if he doesn't know the history behind it. His body language says enough, protective, uncertain, quietly bracing for something that hasn't yet been said. He doesn't speak. Perhaps he knows better. Perhaps he's just smart enough to know when something isn't his to interrupt. The silence between the three of them is dense, full of echoes from a time before uniforms and separate lives. He wants to ask 100 things. Why now? Why here? Have you been back? Why didn't you call? But he doesn't. The law lives in absolutes, in procedure. And tonight, he clings to those cold boundaries like a man gripping a lifeline. "You know how fast you were going?" he asks. Though the question is rhetorical, almost obligatory, he doesn't need the answer. It's just another piece of the performance. The safety of roles played so neither of them has to admit what this is. She nods once. Not an admission of guilt, but not a denial either. Just acknowledgement. Another checkbox. "I'll be right back," he says. It's all he can manage without his voice giving something away. He turns and walks back to the cruiser, her paperwork clutched in his hand. Inside, the warm cabin light feels wrong. Too soft, too safe. He places the documents on the dash, staring at her ID photo again. She looks older than he remembers, but not by much. Her eyes are the same. That quiet fire. That refusal to be defined by anyone but herself. He sits there longer than necessary, heart beating like a fist against his chest. Outside, the two figures remain motionless in the rain-slicked car. From a distance, they could be anyone. Just another soldier. Just another stop. But they're not. And he knows it. Still, when he returns with the citation in hand, he says nothing of the past. Just the fine amount, the date, the signature line. Because out here, under the veil of red and blue, memory holds no authority. Only the law does. And tonight, it's the only thing keeping him from falling apart. The lake was quiet that summer, tucked away beneath a sky that never seemed to end. The kind of place where time slowed down, softened around the edges, no sirens, no dispatch calls. Just water lapping at the shore and cicadas humming from the trees. They hadn't gone there in years, not since she was small enough to fall asleep in the backseat before they even hit the gravel road. But that year before everything started to unravel, they went back. She was 16, growing into herself with sharp edges and quiet moods. There was still laughter, still moments when her guard dropped, and she looked at him with that same awe she had as a little girl. But those moments were becoming fewer, thinner, like sunlight filtering through overgrown branches. Still, that summer, they tried. They arrived with a cooler full of sandwiches and 2 towels that never made it out of the car. She had brought a book she never read. He had brought a fishing rod he never used. Instead, they spent the first hour skipping stones. She was terrible at it, too much wrist, not enough angle. Her rocks dropped like leaden promises. He showed her the trick. Flat stone, low flick, follow through. She got it on the 4th try, maybe 5th. The smile that spread across her face when the stone danced once, twice, 3 times across the surface was pure. Unburdened. It lit something in him that had been dimmed by too many long shifts. Too many nights walking into rooms with broken glass and broken people. Later, he let her behind the wheel of his old pickup. The one with the stubborn clutch and the worn leather seat she used to bounce on when she was small. She was nervous at first, asking him to remind her where first gear was, how to find the bite point. He talked her through it gently. No uniform, no orders. Just a father teaching his daughter how to move forward on her own. She stalled, of course. Once, then twice. The truck lurched and died, coughed in protest. She hit the steering wheel and groaned, but he laughed, not at her, but in that way that said, "It's okay. You're learning, you're trying." She laughed too, eventually. The kind of laugh that was bright and alive and made him forget, for just a moment, all the ways the world could go wrong. They drove down a dirt path, dust kicking up behind them like memory. Windows down, wind in their faces. She asked him about his first car. He told her about a rusted-out Mustang that could barely take corners. She asked him why he became a cop. He said it was to do something that mattered. She nodded, didn't say much more. But she listened. That night, they sat by the water until the stars blinked awake. He told her stories from the job toned-down versions, just enough to sound brave. She asked him if he ever got scared. He said yes. She didn't press him after that. It was the last summer they had before the shouting began. Before the distance widened. Before she packed her things and walked out, one foot still half-rooted in that lake, that dust road, that pickup truck. He would come back to the lake once, years later, alone. The shoreline looked the same, but something was gone. Something only she had brought with her. And standing there, skipping stones by himself, he couldn't remember the last time he had laughed the way he did that summer. Or if he ever had since. There are no neat measurements for absence, but still he tried. He kept track, in his way. On a pad once meant for traffic stops, Tucked in the glove compartment beneath spare pens and expired registration slips, he began jotting down distances. The first one read, Fort Benning, 1,217 miles. Beneath that, Camp Buring, 7,140. Numbers lined up like fence posts between them, each one a marker of how far she'd gone, and how still he had stayed. He didn't show it to anyone. It wasn't meant to be seen, just his own reckoning. A logbook of the road that stretched between father and daughter, as if writing it down might somehow shrink the space. It never did. Years stacked like bricks, 4, 5, then more. Each time he reached for the phone, something clenched in his chest. He'd hover over her contact, thumb trembling slightly, pulse too loud in his ears. Once, he even let it ring. Twice, 3 times. But when the line picked up to a distant voicemail, he froze. Left no message, hung up. He told himself she was busy. That military life didn't allow for distractions. That there would be a better time, a clearer day. But the truth lay somewhere deeper, in the place he never let himself visit unless the night was long and the whiskey was sharp. He was afraid she wouldn't answer, that she had moved on. That his voice, once the anchor of her world, no longer meant anything. Letters sat unsent in his nightstand drawer. Written late, scribbled in ink that smeared when he paused too long. They were never angry, never demanding, just fragments of thought. Saw a girl with your walk today. Made me stop mid-step. Or do you remember the lake? That truck is still barely holding together. Small things, human things. But he never stamped them. Never trusted them to carry what he couldn't say out loud. He tried once, on her birthday, to send a card. Wrote her name carefully on the envelope. Added his return address in the corner, like a breadcrumb trail home. But he never made it to the mailbox. Kept telling himself it was too late in the day, that he'd do it tomorrow. Tomorrow turned into another year. He watched the news sometimes, not for headlines, but for any footage of returning soldiers. Faces in crowds, reunions caught in shaky camera focus. He'd watch them reunite with their families, tight hugs and relieved sobs, and wonder if one day she might step off a plane and look for him in the crowd. But he never went to the airports, never stood among the signs and balloons. Hope, he'd learned, could wear you thin. Love, they say, can survive anything. But paper fades. Words get lost in the shuffle of life. A missed call becomes a missed year. A pause becomes a silence. And some silences harden into truth. She hadn't stopped loving him, that much he believed. But love without presence, without effort, without words, it begins to drift. Like letters without addresses. Like signals sent across static. Eventually, even the strongest bonds fray, if never tended. And as he stared at the miles on that weathered pad, he realized that distance wasn't always measured in geography. Sometimes, it lived in the quiet choices not to reach out, and in the hope that someone else would reach first. The name came back from dispatch in a tone that was sterile, unknowing. Private First Class Logan Reyes. Male, 20 years old. Stationed at the local base just 3 weeks prior, clean record. No outstanding warrants. Insurance valid. Tags up to date. Everything about him said this stop should have been forgettable. Standard. Another name in a logbook. But names are only part of a story. Standing beside the car again, citation in hand, the officer stole another glance at the driver. Reyes met his gaze directly this time, polite, alert, but not deferential. There was something else beneath the surface. A kind of guarded awareness that didn't quite match the simplicity of his file. His hands were still on the wheel, but there was a tension in his grip now. Not from fear, from caution. Why was he driving? That question, small, quiet, began to echo. She had always hated being a passenger. Even as a teenager, she wanted to be in control. She once told him that driving was the only time she felt fully herself. Free. Moving forward. It had taken her 3 tries to parallel park during her driving test, and she'd been furious with herself for not getting it right the first time. She didn't like depending on others, least of all behind the wheel. So why was Logan Reyes in the driver's seat of her car? The officer shifted his weight, looking over the top of the car briefly to where she sat, still composed, still silent. Her posture hadn't changed, her gaze fixed on something only she could see. But Reyes, his eyes flicked to her once. Quick. Almost imperceptible. The kind of look that wasn't permission-seeking but protective. Familiar. Not strangers. He tapped the papers gently against the roof of the car. "Private Reyes," he said, voice measured. "Is there a reason you were operating this vehicle tonight?" Reyes nodded once. "She asked me to drive," he said. His voice was calm, even, almost rehearsed. "Is she unwell?" "No, sir." A pause. He waited. Sometimes silence could draw truth to the surface faster than pressure. But Reyes didn't fill the space. He just watched, ready, guarded. There was a knowing in the young man's eyes, something beyond regulation and training. He knew who the officer was. Or if he didn't know before the stop, he knew now. That kind of recognition doesn't stay hidden for long. The way she stiffened slightly when the cruiser pulled behind them. The way Reyes had looked in the mirror, jaw tightening, like he'd just stepped into a room charged with someone else's past. They weren't on a base errand. They weren't returning from a bar. This drive wasn't casual. It had purpose. And the fact that she wasn't behind the wheel said more than either of them did. "All right," the officer said at last, letting the moment pass. He handed back the license, the registration, the clean envelope of paper that meant the stop was nearly over. But his eyes lingered, just for a moment longer, on Reyes. On the tension hidden beneath his discipline. Sometimes, the file says everything is clean. But people carry things no database can record. And Reyes was carrying something. Not guilt. Not fear. Responsibility. A secret kept, perhaps. A promise made. And the only question now was whether that secret belonged to her. Or to both of them. The pen rests in her hand longer than it should. A small, government-issued thing with fading black ink and a chewed cap. It's the kind of pen that's passed through 100 hands, signed away countless offenses: speeding, broken taillights, failure to yield, minor infractions, routine violations. But in this moment, it feels heavier than it has any right to be. Her hand hovers over the signature line, the citation held against the dashboard by her other palm. Rain taps softly on the roof above. A steady rhythm that fills the silence neither of them seems willing to break. She doesn't ask what the fine is, doesn't offer an apology or an excuse. She simply nods once, barely perceptible, and begins to sign. Her handwriting has changed. He notices that first. It used to be rounder, more fluid, the way she signed school forms and birthday cards when she was younger. Now, it's clipped, minimal. A soldier's signature, functional, without ornament. But as she writes, the pen stutters slightly, the line hesitating midway through the final stroke. Her hand is trembling. It's subtle. Just a slight vibration, like a leaf caught in still water. But he sees it. Of course he does. He has trained for years to catch the micro-expressions, the tells of discomfort, fear, guilt. But this isn't any of those. It's something softer, something more dangerous in its fragility. He watches her eyes. They don't move from the paper. Not once. But there's tension in the corners of her mouth, the way her jaw locks ever so slightly, the way she exhales without breath. She's holding something in. Not words, not emotion. Just the weight of being seen, truly seen for the first time in years. And she doesn't know what to do with it. He wants to ask if she's all right. The question builds inside him like steam behind glass, pressing forward, searching for release. He wants to reach out, to say her name, to tell her she doesn't have to hold it all together. Not here, not now, not with him. But he doesn't. Because the space between them is still too wide. Because the years they lost aren't bridged by one moment of trembling fingers. Because he knows that if he speaks too soon, too softly, it might break her open. And maybe she doesn't want that. Maybe she needs him to stay behind the badge, just a little while longer. So he watches. Watches as she finishes signing, caps the pen, and hands it back to him without a word. Their fingers brush this time, lightly. Neither flinches, but neither holds on. The contact is fleeting, an echo of something remembered, not relived. He nods once, taking the citation, folding it with quiet precision. It doesn't matter now, not really. The fine, the offense, it's all dust beside the silence that passed between them like a secret no one wanted to say out loud. She turns back to the window, eyes forward, composed again. He hesitates for a breath longer than protocol allows. Then he steps away. And in the shrinking space between them, her silence speaks. Not in anger, not in forgiveness, but in something that sounds, if only faintly, like a beginning. The rain has thinned to a mist now, barely enough to notice unless you're standing still. He is. The citation pad is tucked beneath his arm, the pen returned to its place. Procedure complete. Everything by the book. Nothing left to do, except the one thing that doesn't belong in a manual. He steps back from the window, nods once to the driver. Reyes returns the gesture a soldier's acknowledgement, crisp and automatic. No words pass between them, but the look in the young man's eyes lingers. There's understanding there, or something like it. The engine hums low, steady, waiting. She still hasn't looked at him again. He stands there for a beat too long, soaking in the image of her. Not just the woman she is now, but the ghost of the girl she used to be sitting in his passenger seat years ago, legs too short to reach the floor, inventing stories about every passing car. She used to ask him what made a good person. He never had a good answer. Now, looking at her, he wonders if she ever found one on her own. He wants to say something real. Not official, not rehearsed. Just something simple that doesn't carry the weight of every missed birthday, every unsent letter. He wants to say her name. Wants to ask where she's going, how she's doing, if she's been okay all this time. But all of those things live behind a wall he built himself, brick by careful brick, over years of silence. And now it's too late to tear it down. So he says what he can. Have a safe night. It comes out softer than it should, almost a whisper. But his voice, for the first time, betrays him. There's a crack in it, subtle but sharp, like a thread pulled too tight, finally beginning to fray. She doesn't answer. She doesn't nod. She doesn't even blink. Reyes shifts the car into drive, his foot easing off the brake. The taillights glow red against the wet road. The car begins to move, slowly at first, rolling back onto the main stretch of highway. She remains still in the seat, her profile fading by degrees until only her silhouette is left, then not even that. He watches until the lights are gone, until the road swallows the last trace of her. He doesn't move. Not for a while. The mist clings to his skin. The air is damp and hollow, filled with the kind of quiet that follows something sacred and unfinished. The kind of silence that doesn't ask for explanation, only acknowledgement. He listens to it, lets it settle in the space where his voice once lived. He should return to the cruiser, file the report, mark it as a completed stop. Nothing unusual, no incident. He should carry on. But instead, he stands there, alone. The road stretching before him, endless and unchanging. And in that space, that quiet stretch of night, he realizes something he hasn't let himself admit until now. She was never really gone. Just out of reach. And maybe, for now, that's all she could give. A glimpse. A passing. A silence that said more than any words ever could. The box sits on the floor like a forgotten truth. Its edges have grown soft over the years, the tape yellowed and peeling away. Dust clings to the top in a fine layer, the kind that settles when something hasn't been touched in too long. It's still where he left it, under the bed, behind a stack of old newspapers and winter boots he hasn't worn in 2 seasons. He kneels slowly, joints stiff from the long shift, heart heavier than he expected it would be. His fingers hesitate before lifting the lid. He tells himself it's just paper, just ink and dates and folded pages, but he knows better. The first letter rests at the top, crisp and careful. Boot camp, week 3. Her handwriting is round, full of loops and energy. "Hey Dad," it begins, the letters dancing across the page like she had rushed to write it before lights out. She writes about the early mornings, the endless running, the blisters on her feet. But there's pride in her words. Determination. She tells him she's learning how to take orders without losing herself. She says she misses the smell of his coffee in the morning, the creak of the hallway floorboards when he used to come check if she was asleep. She ends it with, "Hope work isn't wearing you down too much. You always told me to push through, so I'm pushing." He reads the next. And the next. Each letter a breadcrumb back to a version of her he never fully knew. From the desert, she writes about heat so thick it tastes like metal, about sandstorms that sneak up on you like ghosts. She describes her squadmates by their habits. One hums while cleaning his rifle, another always falls asleep before lights out. She writes about the stars and how they look more honest from that far away. But she never writes about fear, not once. Her handwriting changes. Around the 3rd deployment, it sharpens, more angular, like she's carving the words into the page instead of writing them. The sentences are shorter, less filled with color. There's a formality creeping in, like the letters aren't just for him anymore but part of a record. He wonders if that's when she started giving up hope that he'd ever write back. There's one he doesn't remember seeing before. Thinner envelope, postmarked a year ago. No return address. Her name scribbled in the corner, the ink smudged slightly. He unfolds it slowly, carefully, as if the paper itself might crack. It's only a few lines. But it's the one that undoes him. "I don't know if you'll ever read this, but if you do, I hope you're proud, even if I'm not what you imagined." His hands tighten around the page. The room is quiet, except for the rustle of old paper and the low hum of the fridge in the kitchen. He reads the sentence again and again, until the words blur, until the silence becomes too loud to ignore. He never said it, never found the time or the way or the moment. But he is proud. Not just of her rank or her endurance or her discipline, but of the woman she's become. The one who survived more than he'll ever know, the one who wrote to him long after he stopped writing back. He sits there on the bedroom floor, surrounded by letters that had waited longer than they should have. The past unfolding page by page, and for the first time in years, he writes something down. Just 2 words. "I'm proud." Not for her to read, not yet, but because the silence has lasted long enough. The precinct is quiet in the early hours, long after the streets have emptied and the radios fall silent. Fluorescent lights buzz above him, casting pale reflections on the polished tile. He sits alone at his desk, the last of the paperwork spread out before him. The citation lies near the top of the stack, filed, logged. Just another entry in a system designed to forget faces and remember numbers. He signs it, initials the corner, closes the file. But the image doesn't leave him. Not the car, not the driver. Her. The way she wouldn't meet his eyes at first. The way her hand trembled when she signed. The way she said nothing and yet left him with a silence that won't stop ringing. He could close the drawer and go home. Let this night fade like the others, disappear into routine. But he doesn't. Instead, His hand moves slow at first toward the drawer to his right. He opens it, reaches past the flashlight batteries and the half-empty pack of gum, and pulls out an old, battered notepad. The kind he used to keep in his patrol car before everything turned digital. Its cover is worn, edges curled like leaves left out in the Sunday. It smells faintly of ink and dust. Of waiting. He flips past half-used pages, old phone numbers, forgotten reminders, finds a clean sheet, stares at it. Then he begins. Not with her name, not yet. That feels too abrupt, too final. He starts instead with a memory. Do you remember that summer by the lake? His pen hesitates, then keeps moving. You stalled the truck 4 times in 5 minutes. I laughed so hard I spilled my coffee. You said the gears were wrong. I said your timing was off. But you figured it out. He doesn't know where the words are coming from, only that they've waited too long to be said. There's no structure, no apology, no clear beginning or end. Just fragments. Moments. Truths he never gave her when she was younger because he thought silence would protect them both. It didn't. I saw you tonight. You probably knew I would. Maybe you even expected it. I didn't. I wasn't ready. The words come faster now, like a tide rushing in after years of drought. He tells her he read the letters, all of them. That he saw the shift in her handwriting, felt the distance carved into every page. That he understood now why she had to go. That she didn't owe him an explanation, but he wished he had asked for one anyway. You're not what I imagined. You're more. His hand shakes slightly as he finishes the sentence. He closes the notepad gently, doesn't tear the page out. Not yet. Maybe he'll send it. Maybe he won't. But for now, it exists. And that's enough. He leans back in the chair, the room dimming around him as the motion sensor lights flicker off, leaving only the glow of the desk lamp. There are things we carry because we must. Duty. Regret. The sound of a name we haven't spoken aloud in years. But there are other things we choose to carry. Hope. And tonight, he carries just enough of it to start again. She was 12, legs dangling just above the floor mat, sneakers tapping the rhythm of a song only she seemed to know. The passenger seat was still too big for her back then, but she loved being there next to him, close enough to reach for the radio dial or ask 100 questions about the road ahead. The windows were down that day, summer air warm on their faces as they drove through winding back roads, the trees overhead casting flickering shadows across the dashboard. She leaned forward, arms crossed on the glove box, grinning. One day, she said, I'm gonna drive just like you. Fast, really fast. He raised an eyebrow, smirking at the road. Not while I'm around, he said, and she laughed, this big, bright sound that filled the whole truck like sunlight pouring through the windshield. He remembers how she looked then. Ponytail whipping in the wind, eyes full of fire, of hunger for everything just out of reach. She loved the feeling of movement, of going somewhere, of knowing the world was larger than she could yet see. He never told her how much of himself he saw in that restlessness. He figured she'd understand one day. That moment flickers, then fades. Now, in the present, he stands in the soft hush of night, the shoulder of the road quiet beneath his boots. The cruiser behind him hums low, headlights dimmed, red and blue lights no longer spinning. The car she rode in is gone, swallowed by the stretch of highway that winds into blackness. No tire squeal, no rush. Just a calm departure, as if the road called her forward, and she answered without hesitation. The passenger seat is empty now. And not just in her car. He stares down the road longer than he should, searching the dark horizon as though it might change its mind and give her back. Just for a minute, just long enough to say one more thing. But she's gone. He thinks of what it meant, her silence, her presence, her choice to let him see her like that. Uniformed, composed, in control. Not asking for forgiveness, not demanding closure, just there. A daughter, once. A soldier, now. A mystery, always. He returns to the cruiser eventually, the door creaking slightly as he opens it. He settles into the driver's seat. It feels colder now. He glances to the right. The empty space beside him glares back, too familiar. He can almost hear her voice, 12 years old again, full of impossible confidence. I'll drive fast like you. He rests his hand on the steering wheel, staring out into the distance, into the ache of memory, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, some road circle back when you least expect it. The engine hums beneath him. The highway stretches ahead. And somewhere down the line, unseen in the dark, a daughter drives on. Not fast, not reckless. Just far enough to find her way.